Okay, let's see if that music volume's okay at that level. I'm sure you'll let me know, hopefully. Welcome to my studio. My name is Michael Markowsky, and today we're going to be making a painting by another one of my very, very, very favorite artists, if not my most favorite artist of all, Tom Thomson. Now, today is the final day of Tom Thomson week. So far we have, this is the fourth of four classes that we've been doing, looking at the work of Tom Thomson, celebrating the work of Tom Thomson, and doing our darndest to get even close to approximating the incredible work of Tom Thomson. And I hope that you paint along with me, because as much fun as it is for me to make these paintings, I have a blast doing this. I'm certainly not making much money doing it at all, but the act of doing it is a blast for me, and hopefully that comes across through these videos, because that's why I keep on doing them, because they bring me so much joy. But the thing that brings me even more joy is seeing your versions of the paintings that we make. So I strongly encourage you to paint along with me if at all possible. Or you might want to watch and pick up some pointers and then maybe paint afterwards. Or I know some people do that and then paint along, watch it again, and paint along. Anyway, I will share, because I know that most people who are watching these videos are watching me for the very, very first time. So, let's kind of jump right into it, and I'm going to show you some of the... Actually, this is not the painting we're going to do. This is the sketch that Tom did for the painting we're going to do. This is the painting that we're going to make today. This is the Jack Pine from 1916, 1970. I'm actually not exactly sure. I think this might be from... It's hard to say exactly when he painted this. I think this might have been the winter of 1960, or no, like kind of January, February of 1916. So this is, Tom Thomson died in 1917. So this is one of the, he still made another probably 50, 60 paintings after this. But this painting was sold to the National Gallery while he was still alive. I'm 90% sure of that fact. So it, for him, sort of marked this like pretty high point, right? Tom Thomson went from total obscurity as an artist in 1912 to, by the end of his life, really having altered the trajectory of Canadian art entirely. Although he maybe died before the effects of the work that he did were actually felt. Anyway, so there is an outline for today's painting, which you can download for free and trace and transfer onto your canvas, or however you want to get it on there. I'm going to show you the way that I would suggest to do that, and I'll just share really quickly. There's a link down below for a Dropbox folder. If you click on the Dropbox folder, you'll see all of these files here, and some of these names are familiar to you and some of them aren't. As I mentioned a few times, A.Y. Jackson is another member of, or Tom Thomson, or A.Y. Jackson was really the person that was the driving force between the founding of the Group of Seven after Tom Thomson died. Again, I've been saying this over and over because people ask it over and over, and it's a common misconception. Tom Thomson was not a member of the Group of Seven. After he died, his friends, 7 of his friends, got together and formed the Group of Seven. And A.Y. Jackson, Alexander Young Jackson, originally from Montreal, Quebec, was really the driving force behind that group. So if you're looking, and we also did a Lauren Harris painting in our our intro to painting course, which is, there's a link to that below if you want to do that entire 45 episode course. Those paintings are much at least the first maybe 20 of them are much easier. So if you're finding some of these and you're like, oh my goodness, this is too tough, and I'm going to do my best to make it as easy as possible. If you still find it too difficult, in fact, we can just kind of quickly, this was here. So, I mean, we have Henri Matisse, Vincent van Gogh, Giorgio Morandi, Emily Carr, Frida Kahlo, David Hockney, Mary Cassatt, Andy Warhol, Banksy, Marc Chagall, Gustav Klimt, Thomas Kincaid, Bridget Riley, Hokusai, Jan Vermeer, etc. Right? Lots of names here if you're interested in that. But let's just jump down to this folder here. And you can see there's all these different files in here. We're only going to be looking at these final the ones that say number 5, because that's our 5th and final painting that we're going to make today. So you can download the outlines here. These two are exactly the same. One's a PDF and one's a JPEG, whatever's easier for you to print out. And here's the image, right? So here's the actual painting, and then here's the tracing that I did, which again is provided to you for free. And again, I think it is interesting to take a quick look at the sketch that Tom did, and that sketch was roughly this size, right? So this is a 9x12 canvas, and his sketches, his oil sketches as they're called, were done on location in Algonquin Park, and were probably done within about an hour to an hour and a half or so. And then he took those sketches, so he would be painting all summer, or spring, summer, and fall in Algonquin Park from late February all the way until early November in some cases. And then he'd go back to Toronto. He was sharing a studio at the time with A.Y. Jackson. Again, that name comes up over and over and over again. And he would enlarge these paintings. These quick little sketches that he made in his studio, he would enlarge them. So this painting itself is much larger. And we'll take a look here in a second as to the size of it and some of the details, etc. So I just want to share with you how to transfer this drawing onto canvas for anyone who might be who wants to do it that way. Let's move this here. So you can see, you just take a canvas, you can print off that outline off of your printer at home on regular photocopy paper, regular paper that you would use for printing things out on. I actually print mine out on a little bit thicker paper just because I like I just like thicker paper, but it doesn't really matter. And then so here's some carbon paper. You can use carbon paper or graphite paper. I've even shown in the past how to do this. If you don't have any graphite or carbon paper at all, you can flip that piece of paper that's got the image on it and rub your pencil all over the back side so that it's kind of gray on one side, and then it essentially converts that piece of paper into a piece of carbon paper, and you can trace that onto the canvas and it'll leave marks on the canvas. You can see here I'm just making sure that this painting is level as much as possible, so that because I think, you know, if it's okay if it's a little bit off, a little bit crooked, you probably won't notice it. But if it is like radically crooked, it will drive you nuts, or at least it drives me nuts when I see my paintings and I got a horizon line that's crooked. Okay, so I'm not gonna play this whole thing. I'll just kind of show you. You see, I'm drawing these lines using a ruler. That helps. And then quickly go over all this. I'm not too concerned about getting every single line on there. The basics, as long as kind of the general big shapes are on there, then you're good, right? And that's what it looks like. And you can peel off the paper and you're good to go. And then you've got something that looks like this, right? And you can even see I didn't even carry these lines to the edge. You could use a ruler for that if you want. I'm just going to quickly extend those. Let's just quickly flip that around. Now I'm going to paint over top of this painting in a moment. This outline, you can do with it whatever you want. You could recycle it, or you could paint over it, or you could use it for tests, or you could give it to... I've got like, what, 100 of these almost now. So you could give them to a small child in your family, or a large child in your family who might want to color it in. So let's see. Let's take a look at the painting before we jump in here, and just think about like how we, because usually what I do is I prep the surface here with some paint. So what I'm looking for, oops, is, can we see what the color of the canvas is underneath all of this? So we're using our kind of detective skills. I don't know if, let me see if I can. Let's do this. So I'm looking at this little area down there. Is that some of the raw canvas, or... It's hard to say. So we have something up here. It's a little bit darker. You know, one thing I just want to say is there are... I was thinking about this last night after we finished our episode. There are faster ways to paint any of the paintings we've been doing really since that intro to painting course ended. So I'm not necessarily trying to find the fastest possible way to finish a painting. I'm trying to kind of form a balance between trying to honor the process that the artist used, in this case Tom Thomson, with the skills and abilities of a beginner to intermediate artist. And kind of my third option is like, okay, let's try to get this done as quickly as possible. Because a painting like this that Tom did, he probably worked on this every day for maybe 2 or 3 weeks, right? He might, and he's painting in oil on a larger canvas, and he probably had 2 or 3 other paintings on the go at the same time. So when you hear an artist say, oh yeah, I worked on this for 3 weeks, you're like, oh, you mean you got up every day at 7 in the morning and you went to the studio and you sat there putting little dabs of paint on it, you know, all the way until 5 or 10 o'clock at night, and then you did the same thing every day for 3 weeks, skipped Saturdays and Sundays? And there are some artists that do that for sure. I don't think Tom Thomson did that, but one of the reasons why it might take an artist, you know, 3 weeks, a month, or a year to make a painting is often, especially if you're using oil paint, it takes a while to dry. And if you're painting paint on top of other oil paint and you don't want those colors to mix, if you don't want to paint wet on wet, as it's called, then you need to let one surface dry as much as possible before you paint on another one. So it's often the case that artists might let a painting dry or dry mostly before painting a little bit more on it, and then so they might have 3 or 4 or a dozen on the go simultaneously, and they're kind of moving between paintings. And especially if they get, that's actually the way that I often work. I often have lots of paintings going simultaneously, and the benefit of that, unlike what we do when we're painting one painting at a time in these episodes, is that you end up sort of not getting too precious about your painting, because you're just sort of like, there's kind of an assembly line, and then it's not really until the very end where you start kind of, you're like, okay, now I'm just going to focus on this and finish it, and I'm going to work on it for like 5 hours straight or whatever. Okay, so that was a digression. So what I'm going to mix a color that we can put on the painting to start with. And actually, it might be worth just because of that, checking in with the paintings we did over the past week. So, well, let's see. Let's look at this angle here. Where should we go put this, and then this, and this and that? And nope, they're not really in a good order here. But this is the painting we began with on Monday. We did these two paintings on Tuesday, and they look very similar, don't they? Because this is the sketch for this painting, right? So on Tuesday, we did two paintings in one session. This one we did in an hour, and it literally had a clock running to try to simulate the speed that he was working at. And then we spent about 2 hours, 2.5 hours working on this one. And then this is the one we did yesterday while my daughter was sleeping, and we did that in about an hour as well, right? So these three here were sketches that he did while he was in Algonquin Park. He might have been in a, well, these, he could have been in a canoe. He could have been sitting next to a campfire while he painted this at night. We discussed all that kind of stuff. So he was working quickly while the light was changing, etc. And that's, and then he would go back to his studio in Toronto and then take these sketches and refine them into these. Now, he didn't do that many of them because, unfortunately, he died literally 104 years ago today, right? So today, July 8th, 2021, marks the 104th anniversary of Tom Thomson's unfortunate passing. Oh, the reason why I brought all these out here wasn't to give you a story, is I wanted to just show quickly that we mixed different colors that we put underneath here to start our paintings. So this one, which ended up like that, we just used our warm yellow, if I recall. We just put the warm yellow on there. And then this one, you can even see a lot of this coming through. We put this kind of orange color to kind of simulate a wood, because he's painting on plywood panels, so you could see some of that paint here on the back side. And then we also tried to simulate wood here. I just mixed a little bit more of a light brown color to try to get a little bit closer to a plywood panel like that. Right, so these are painting panels that I use. And then this one, we tried to mix something that looked a little bit closer to a canvas, a stretched canvas, a raw canvas. Anyway, so I think we'll do something similar today. So let's get, I like mixing these grounds on a separate palette, just so that I can get really nice and messy, and then I've got a nice fresh palette to paint on when I'm painting the actual painting itself. And I think it also is it's a good way of kind of reminding myself that that initial part of the painting, when we're just putting the ground down, a painting ground, is something we're doing quickly. It's not the official part of the painting itself, and we're moving quickly and not being precious. So we'll start out with some warm yellow. And I don't know exactly what I really just have to guess, really, to what that color would have been under there. So you know what? I might just default to this color, because we've used that for like 90% of our paintings so far. And I think let's just do that. It's really what I'm talking about with adding a specific color is pretty it's like almost esoteric stuff that the majority of people, especially people watching me right now, probably could care less about. And I also really, I apologize if I'm confusing people, because I could see some people going like, okay, I get it that we painted this color with that painting, but when I'm making my own painting, I don't know what color I should be using. Like, now you're just making it more confusing for me. And I really don't want that to happen at all. I really want to be simplifying things for people. So if in doubt, you can always paint on a white surface. And there's, I would say, the majority of people do that. The majority of people teaching you how to paint on YouTube do that. They just go directly and start painting the leaves and stuff on here. However, traditionally, artists would put some kind of a colored ground on top of the canvas to for all sorts of various different reasons, which I think we've gone into ad nauseum over the bunch of episodes. But just while I'm doing this, reasons such as that because this color can really change the final look of the painting. And we've seen that happen when we've made certain paintings that have different colors in the background. A good example is that Hilma af Klint painting we made, again, in that Intro to Painting class. I'm just getting the sides of the painting. Okay. I just think now everything just sort of looks yellow now, but okay. And then just gonna go and finish that off. Beautiful. Okay, so I'm going to blast this with a little bit... Actually, yeah, I'll blast it with a little bit of air here in a second. Maybe what I want to do is just show a little bit of information about this painting and about Tom Thomson, because not everybody's necessarily watched the first 3 episodes in this Tom Thomson series, right? I want people to know that there is a private Facebook group just for people that are watching right now and who are painting along with me. This is a great way of sort of finding out about the new videos as they're coming out. And also you can see the work that people like yourself are creating week to week, right? And I think it's just so exciting. Like, so here's Dolores's version of the West Wind that we did a couple days ago. Right, oh, there's cool. There's Eleanor's version of yesterday's painting. Mud Bay, Round Lake Mud Bay. That's gorgeous. Interesting. So one of the things we did yesterday, I was doing all those kind of swirling marks all over the canvas, trying to replicate his. And I see here's Deborah's version. Oh, cool. Joshua, look at that. Nice painting. And Albrecht Dürer. This is one of the most famous drawings ever made. And I see May's saying we did this. I taught a whole 40 episode drawing course, which is all free. It's available too. There's a link to it just below if you want to learn how to draw, which I think the more you know how to draw, the easier it is to paint. But this is one of the drawings that we did when we were drawing hands. Anyway, so let's push on here. As you can see here, we are at the 104th anniversary of Tom Thomson's mysterious death. So, because we are on this infamous anniversary, throughout today's episode, we'll talk a little bit about that. about the various different theories, of which there are infinite numbers of possibilities of how he died, all the way from natural causes to murder. We'll get all into that because that's a whole cottage industry of books that have been written about that. But let me just we'll talk about that as we go. Here's again just a quick overview of Tom Thomson's career. I think there's 40 images here on WikiArt, and it kind of gives you some highlights of the work that he was making. And you know, it's interesting just looking at these as opposed to today's painting. A lot of these images, they're great landscape paintings, but they're very busy, right? There's a lot of depth, but I think what makes today's painting, and if we go back to it, so unique, is this solitary tree right in the foreground, right? And it really clarifies things, right? Our attention is immediately drawn to the central image in the middle of the painting. Whereas when we look at some of his older work, you know, it's maybe less clear what the main subject of the painting is. You know, some of them we have like a bolt of lightning here. We've got maybe some big clouds going on. But I think this, and then of course the West Wind, which is another painting very similar to the painting we're about to do today, also has that solitary tree. And there's people who've written a lot about what does that tree represent. Tom himself? Does it represent Canada? You know, all you could infinite interpretations of all these paintings, because Tom left maybe a dozen letters throughout his life, so we don't really know what he was thinking. Was this just a painting it's just a painting of a tree, or was there larger meanings for it? Yeah, let me see. Is there anything I want to say? There are a few great paintings of his that are missing here, but there is a whole page dedicated purely to the Jack Pine on Wikipedia. And yeah, it measures 127 centimeters. I wonder if there's one in inches here, the Jack Pine. So for 127, I grew up in Canada here, but then I spent a quarter of my life in Los Angeles. Let's see. So, okay, so 50 inches gives you an idea. So, what would we say? 100, so like 50 by 58 inches or something. It's almost a square composition. And I'm not going to share that link with you just yet, because that's one of the great stories about this painting. So anyway, this is almost dry, in fact, so let's start putting some paint onto our palette right now. Probably by that time that will be dry. So I see already a bunch of comments in the chat here. I'll take a look in a moment. See, Deborah's saying, hi everyone, Rick and I here, we're both painting. I think that's really cool. Making a painting with someone else, you know, working on the same paint, or your own, like, you're two people working on two different paintings, or two people working on similar paintings side by side, is, I think, a really cool experience. That's one of the things that I miss about teaching these classes in person, is having a whole classroom of people working on the same painting, and then at the end of the class we set them all up against the wall, and we look at them together, and it's always so interesting seeing 20 different interpretations of the same painting. So I can't wait until the world returns back to some level of normalcy so that we can have those sorts of gatherings again. We're almost there, right? We're getting pretty close. Go get your vaccine, people. That will help. Let's see. What should we begin with? Let's take a look at this painting and kind of break it down. Now, we've talked about this again ad nauseum, and I hate to be like a broken record, but usually what I do, and I would say 80% of artists do, is they work from the background. They start at the background and then move towards the foreground, and then usually go back to the background, finish the background, and then go back to the foreground and finish the foreground. And that's the reason why that makes a lot of sense, is that one of the ways that we create depth in paintings, the way we create the illusion of space in paintings, is overlapping shapes, right? I mean, just quickly, for instance, you don't see my legs right now. So you immediately think, well, this table is in front of my legs. So I am behind this table. I am behind this cup of tea, right? I know it's pretty straightforward, but if you think about children's pictures and children's drawings, when they're drawing things, everything is side by side. If they're painting a house, there's a house, and then there's a person standing next to the house, and then there's a tree. And if you ask a child, let's say you draw a tree, and you say, put the house in behind the tree, they go, it doesn't even occur to them how to do that. Or they might put the tree in, or the house kind of partly behind here, but they don't think about putting it coming around on the other side of the tree. Anyway, that's a whole other thing. But and I've worked with children for a decade when I was living in Los Angeles, teaching kids all the time. So I saw that all the time. It was very interesting. But one of the ways that we can help create that illusion of space is if we have like two brushstrokes, right, and they're side by side. Well, then they kind of, there's might be a confusion as to what is in, let's say you're painting a tree and you paint a house, and those brushstrokes are just sitting on the same plane, right? They're side by side. All you have to do is one brushstroke a little bit in front of the other, and immediately this one is, the mind of the viewer goes, oh, well, that's in behind there. So the reason why I'm kind of going on this little bit of a tangent, and we talked about this with the West Wind, is we see a bit of Tom playing with these things in this painting, where the background appears almost to be coming over top of the tree, right? It looks like in certain places that he painted the tree first, and then the background is going on top of parts of the tree. And it obviously, again, he worked on this painting for probably at least a few weeks, off and on, over that course of time. So it would not have been, it would have been very easy for him to then go and paint, these tree branches over top of the lines that he's got here, so that there's absolutely no confusion that the tree branch is in front of the background. But he didn't do that, right? That's one of the things that I think is very interesting about Tom Thomson, and what makes him a little bit different than some of his contemporaries. Because I think what he's doing in this painting, and some of his other paintings, is he is at the crossroads at this point in his life between painting in this kind of impressionist style of painting to going in a much more abstract direction. So we'll talk about that as we go here, because he's clearly pushing some boundaries. And his friends, A.Y. Jackson and J.H. McDonald, both of whom later formed the Group of Seven, were literally concerned about this. They wrote letters back and forth saying, I think Tom is starting to explore cubism. He might become a cubist. And they didn't mean that as a good thing. They were like, it's like your friend starts drinking too much. They're like, Uh-oh, here's this guy that we all really think is doing great and is a rising star, and they've all been kind of mentoring him, and maybe he's going off the rails a little bit. Like, what can we do to stop him from doing that? So much so that certain people think that maybe his friends were so worried about him becoming an abstract painter that they murdered him. I mean, that's one of the more extreme theories of how Tom died, but it is out there, right? So, so because Tom is doing some unusual things with this painting, it does raise the possibility that we may do some things a little bit different here. So I'm just thinking to myself, how different should we go, just in terms of our class, and so that people can follow along and paint with me. I think we'll do something similar to what we did with the West Wind last episode, which, if you are on Tuesday, what we did is we actually took some red paint and painted in some of these lines really quickly and established that structure of the painting. So I think that's what I'm going to do. Long story short, you can see I'm trying to think through these ideas right here, right now. So let's take some red. I'm going to take some warm red. I'm going to take a bit of cool red, just to deepen that color a little bit, so it's not quite so electric, right? Warm red on its own can seem a little bit bright, especially if we put other, if we put a dark color next to this red, it can be like, whoa, that's really bright. So I'm just kind of dulling the color a little bit with some cool red in here. It doesn't make too much of a difference. One thing about cool red is a little bit more of a transparent color than the warm red. So now that we got this here, let's just now, I'll leave that up for right now. I'm gonna quickly go over some of these lines. All right, so here's this background. In fact, let's bring up and we're gonna paint over everything, so don't get too don't worry about if, oh, I should get my ruler out here, make sure that's a perfectly painted red line. Don't worry about it. So I think this goes down here. You can see also how I'm holding this brush. You know, I'm holding it further away, and it's like it's just barely, like I'm taking like a snail for a walk or something, right? I'm letting it kind of just be dragged over the surface, right? It's like it's just barely in my hand here, right? And that's kind of a fun way of just holding your brush, and because you'll notice that when you're holding your brush further away like that, you are going to lose some accuracy. But we're not really concerned too much about accuracy here. This would be very similar to kind of how Tom probably began this painting anyway. I don't know if he even drew pencil lines on the surface of this canvas. And you can see I don't care if it's a little bit dry brush in certain places either. And you're probably like, oh, I spent all this time making all these great tracings onto the canvas, and now it's just gonna turn into a big globby mess. What's the point? Well, I don't see the outline, putting the outline down as sort of like, it's not like we're painting by numbers, which I don't have any problem with, but that's just going to help us get things into the general vicinity. Right now we know where our horizon line is, and we know where some of these tree branches are going to go. But beyond that, you don't want to be locked in, and you want to be able to be a little bit playful and like, one of the things I think about is I remember I have a friend of mine in Paris that we went to art school together with, and I've gone and visited him, and he always makes fun because I often, like, I can't remember what the situation was, but I was like, don't worry about it, it's just art, it's just we're just making a painting, like. And he always thought that was quite funny, and he but I think it's kind of true. It's like, I mean, obviously I take art very seriously because I've devoted my whole life to it. This is what I've been doing since I was a little kid. But I don't the main reason why I like painting is because of the pleasure it gives me, the relaxation that happens, and it can take a while to get to the point where you can feel relaxed when you're painting. I totally get that. But I don't want to be at a place where I'm like so anxious about getting it quote unquote perfect that I don't have any fun. Like, then what? Like, there's a lot of other things I could be doing with my time than making paintings, right? Oh, it's hot. Sorry. Okay, more stuff in the chat. I'll look at that in a second. So I've got my rough outline here painted in, using some of these red lines that he used, which is also going to help infuse it with a kind of a brightness, which I like. And maybe while we're right here, I'm looking at the bottom and I see a bunch of red down here. So you know what? I'm going to just take this same red that we've been painting with, and at the risk of making the painting any more confusing than it already is for some people, I'm just going to go in and start putting my red in here. Why not? We got it all mixed up. And like I said, don't worry if you... Like here, I'll put a bunch of red that's not actually there. Right? Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Here's some red that's not actually there. Doesn't matter. But I'm going to try to put some red that is actually where it is. I mean, you could, if you want, just put red all over the bottom of the horizon here. We want to be using mostly warm red. If you're thinking about if I want to use warm red or cool red, warm red would be ideal because this is in our foreground, right? And in the foreground, we want warmer colors because that's going to push the background backwards. And especially if the background is painted with cold colors. Okay. Actually, you know what? Let's just take this and go right down the middle of paint the main tree itself like that. Let's even just widen. There we go. This kind of makes it maybe a little bit more clear. I am tempted to paint red into the where the big leaves and stuff are. I think we'll do a bit of the So often artists do this kind of thing really quickly, usually using a bit of a lighter color than kind of a solid red like this. Or sorry, using a darker color, my apologies. Like a dark brown or even a blue. Yeah, let's just do it all like that. I'll just carry through with that this idea. Might as well, right? It's just to make it easier so people aren't like, why did you do some red in that bush and not some red in that bush? So let's just, to avoid any kind of confusion, I'll just do red everywhere. Right? So we've now basically covered in all of these areas. That's why I say it doesn't really matter if I, put red somewhere where it's technically not, right? You could put a big glob of red in the sky if you wanted. Okay. Now again, if you could get in a time machine and go back in time, and you walked into Tom's studio in Toronto, would you see this? Would you have been able to see the painting? Would it have looked like this at any one point in time? Probably not, right? Okay. So what would most likely happen is this background was probably, like what he probably would have is like, if you're painting with oil paint takes a long time to dry. And so he might have like often what some artists do is they scrape all the extra paint off, or they just let it dry on the palette, and it sometimes gets big and chunky. If you look at the studio Francis Bacon, not the person that some people think wrote Shakespeare's plays, but the British painter from the 1960s. You look his studio up on like, in fact, I'll just do a quick little digression here. It's okay. So here's the studio of Francis Bacon, and it was a complete disaster. This is like a hoarder's paradise. Just junk everywhere, paint splattered floor to ceiling all over the place. Like just a complete mess. And this actually has been this is I think it's like the Art Museum of Dublin. I think he was originally Irish. I'm not sure where, because they basically took a studio apart and recreated it in the museum. If you're interested to see that. But this is an example of an artist who was a very messy painter and had stuff all over the place. Why did I go in that tangent? I don't know. Anyway, I often use colors that are a little bit brighter. And again, I'm trying to simplify. Oh, the reason why I was saying that is often artists would scrape all the paint off, and have like maybe even like a cup or a jar full of just the extra muddy paint. So sometimes what artists would do is they just take a rag and just dip it into that glob of just or still wet paint that they've been accumulating for years, and dilute it with some turpentine and just rub it all over the surface of the canvas. Just to kind of get, it's almost like kind of very freeing to like, because people's like, that first brush stroke is so like terrifying to put on the canvas. If you just take this and you're just like scrubbing it with a dirty rag full of old paint, boom, the most terrifying part of the painting, it's over with, it's done. And now your painting's already begun. That first step has happened, so now you don't have to worry anymore, right? Sometimes I forget where I'm going with my own ideas. Okay, so let's get back here. So let's paint the background next. So the color that we want to make, let's make a purple, and we'll put the purple in the background. And so to make a purple, we're going to take some of the cool red. Looks like this brush I didn't clean that well last night. And then take some warm blue. You can mix them together. Right, the more red we put in there, the more reddish that purple will be. The more blue we put in there, the darker and more bluish that purple will be. I know it sounds so straightforward, but it sounds straightforward maybe to the people that have been painting with me for a while, and then, you know, when I'm teaching these classes for the first time, you see a lot of light bulbs go off, like, oh yeah, I guess, yeah, I didn't even, yeah, of course it makes sense. Yeah, well, obviously. So I'm just adding some white to it, because we have a lot of pastel colors in the sky, right? And actually, we're going to add even more white to it. Okay, so I got some nice purple, and then I'm going to use one of these square brushes, right? So rather than a pointy brush, I'm going to use this kind of flat brush, and this way I can make marks that are kind of like bricks almost, right? And this is how I'm going to do a lot of the sky in this painting. And the way that I'm going to begin this is I'm going to I'm just going to really fill up the painting with a lot of marks like this. And I'm barely going to look at the original. I want to try to get generally in the right direction. But we want to think, really, for the next hour of today's episode, I'm just going to be filling it up. Very little concern about if everything's in the right place. Again, a general concern, like, you know, there's going to be some yellow down here, so, and there's a little green stripe, so I'll try to keep this purple to this top part, but I'm not going to worry about, like, oh, okay, I got to make sure, does that purple end there, or does it go here? Oh, I got to get at the root. Like, don't be so perfectionist about this stage of the painting. You just want to get stuff on the canvas, especially when we're kind of a little bit short for time. You know, if you were trying to make a copy of this painting, you wanted to become a forger, and you wanted to do like an exact reproduction of it, yeah, okay, well then take your sweet time and make sure you're doing it perfectly. But I just want to get as much paint on here as possible. And in fact, this paint might be a little bit too dark even, right? In fact, I think I'm going to add a little bit more white to it. It's probably better. And I can tell when I look at this painting of his that there's many layers of the paint up in the sky here. So I bet you he did something very similar to this as well. It was just like, I'm just going to fill it up, and then afterwards I'm going to take my time and go back and see if I can I might move things around. I might paint that green later on. And it looks like he did just that. Like he painted some colors and then removed some colors, painted over some colors, and so on and so forth, right? There's also a bit of purple down here, so let's put some purple here. I think the color of the purple below it has maybe just a little bit less white in it. It's, some of these are going to be a little bit thicker and wider than others. We're going to kind of, especially in this stage, who cares about making them perfect? As more and more of these lines start filling up the canvas, we'll be a little bit more careful. But don't rob yourself of the fun that you can have at the early stage of the painting by just throwing colors around. All right. Okay, I think that's pretty good. So I'm going to now take some paint and let's take some more white. You can see at the top of the screen here. I'm just going to mix it in with some more. I'm going to make a little bit more of a bluish purple with a good amount of white in there. And let's just keep on going here. Right? Like, again, I'll just leave this on so you could just see how I'm painting this without really looking at the original. I just want to build up like once I've got it all filled in, then I'll get a little bit more concerned as to how close I am to the original. But yeah, some of these lines are a little bit darker than others. That's awesome. Like, okay. So I'm very happy with where I'm at so far here. Let's continue this with some of this blue. Let's go see how I can thin out that line by going over it there. Okay. And then looking down in here, is there any more blue that needs to go down there? No, I don't think that's good. Okay. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of the... Actually, let's just clean this brush. Let's throw it in the water. I'm going to take some cold blue, and I'm going to take some cold yellow. Let's mix that right together, and we can see a nice big bright green. So that's a gorgeous green, but a very unnatural color. So we're going to add a bunch of white to it and tint it down. By tinting it, we're going to remove a lot of the intensity, the saturation of that color. Right, so that's our cold green, cold blue and cold yellow to make a cold green. And just like we did before, let's just paint it in here, just fill it all in. And then you can see slowly now we're getting rid of all the yellow that was there. I'm trying to keep these lines as straight as possible. And you see that I'm also moving all over the canvas. I'm not just doing all, like, working in one area. I'm just bouncing around back and forth. And the more that I bounce around back and forth, the less likely I am just to kind of get obsessed with one area. Alright, so you can now see, maybe I'll start zooming in here. So as I come to like the tree, I'm just sort of start drawing a line that kind of goes maybe in behind some of these tree branches. Here's the water. Let's get some more white in here. Like, I don't even know, I'm not looking at the original to see if, like, oh, am I sure I'm painting the tree branch? And I just keep on painting away. Okay. And then as I do this, you know, I might just take a little bit of, just mix it, have a little bit of a different green in here, just to kind of have a little bit of fun. Okay. So we'll zoom back out. Let's get some of these colors in the ground, or sorry, not the ground, the water below. Just always moving around here. Because I think what I want is, even if I do paint over these lines later on, I won't paint over all of them, but it'll give those colors, it'll look like I've really, you know, spent some time moving around the surface of the painting, adjusting and changing colors, and which is what I should do anyway. Again, all these colors down here are going to get much darker. We're going to put more warm colors in the foreground than we currently have. Okay. So, let's now mix. I'll take some cool yellow. Let's take some cool red. And mix a color. Let's get this kind of orangey. So I'll take some white and make this peachy color. Oops, that's a part of the mountain background. Maybe a little bit of this down here. I don't know how much is down there in the water, but I'm just going to carry this up into this, higher up into the sky. Okay. Pretty good. I think what I'll do is now I'm just going to take a little bit more white, or sorry, yellow, and mix this in with the white. Not cleaning my brush, but just mostly yellow with the brush I just used, and some white. And just finish some of this off here. Put a bit down in here. I just want all of the yellow to be covered. That initial color we put down here, it's just completely obliterated. Right? I haven't looked at the painting on the screen there in a while. I'm just throwing color around here. Okay. Good. So that means a time for a quick little break to wash your brushes. If you're like me and you've got a bunch of these just sitting there in the water, you don't want these sitting in the water all painting session. You want to make sure that because otherwise what happens if it sits in the water, the bristles are going to start to kind of bow outwards, and you're going to end up having a bunch of brushes that are have lost their shape. So I asked just off the top there, what is your favorite Tom Thomson painting? And Joshua says, my favorite has to be the first episode painting that Tom Thomson's Northern Light. I'd say is a gorgeous painting. And if you are interested, he did about 5 or 6 other very similar paintings, nighttime or nocturne paintings as they've been called. So there are more ones to inspire you if you're interested, Josh. Paula says, I am painting along 100%. I like to hear your instructions. Thank you. Joshua says, I'm not painting along today because I'm finishing my Velasquez white study and then I'm doing the Napoleon crossing the Alps painting. Great. You're always up to something, Joshua. I appreciate that. That's great. It's very inspiring. Dolores says, I will watch a bit today but paint later. I love this painting. And Deborah says, oh yeah, there's Rick's painting with along. Paul says, hi Deborah and Rick, good to chat with you guys. Please post your version of the painting. I'd love to see it. And Deborah says, it's good to chat with you also. Rick will be posting his Northern Lights soon. We'll be posting this one also when we finish. We both have different styles and that is neat. Post yours, please. Great. Okay. So I'm very happy with the, I know some people just tuning in right now are like, he's got the colors all wrong. What is he thinking? Why, you know, what kind of teacher is this, right? Let those people come and go. We just want to get some general colors in the background before we move on to the next few steps here. Because what we're going to do next, I'm going to put the colors into this like far hills in the background. And then we're going to paint the foreground imagery, the tree and the ground that's in the front. Oh, there we go. Short power outage. And then we'll come back. We'll fine tune the background, and ideally we won't have to do too much to the tree because that will be what we'll do here shortly, right? So really what we'll do is we're going to end with painting the sky and the in the ground. Again, might be a few little touch-ups here and there, but that will be yeah. So now this is interesting, looking at how he painted the this background here. It would be a little bit different than what I would do, because it looks like he's got some warmer blues back here. Got a little bit. This is a bit. I bet you this is a combination of a cold blue and a warm blue. So it's not entirely either, but again, that is something that starts showing him departing a little bit from that classical approach to painting with warm and cool colors, and he's challenging some of those notions a little bit, which is one of those things that would have worried AY and J.H. McDonald. It's like, what is this guy doing? Have we lost him to the avant-garde? Which is, you know, a funny thing. Just as a quick digression, there is this, you know, one of the big myths of the Group of Seven is that when they started making their paintings, that there was this outrage from the public and there was protests the critics slammed. There was some criticism. There's definitely published criticism where people did not like some of these paintings and saw them as being a little bit. One of the criticisms to A.Y. Jackson was it looked like there's a really funny quote that it's something like it looks like the breakfast that the elevator operator dropped on the floor on the way to work or something, right? It was like this just splatter of smushed blobs of paint, right? But for the most part, it wasn't as controversial as they made it out to be. And honestly, the Group of Seven, A.Y. Jackson in particular, were pretty savvy marketers. Remember, almost all of them worked for a marketing design companies, right? They knew they were creating advertisements all day long. They knew what buttons to push to get into the newspapers. And if you go around saying, oh, there's all this controversy and people are up in arms and riots are breaking out of our paintings, then people are like, wow, really? Oh my goodness, we got to go see those paintings. We got to see what everyone's talking about. That kind of controversy did happen about 50 years before in France when the Impressionists were showing their paintings, and in 1912 when there was the Armory show in New York and the Cubists first exhibited their paintings. But so ultimately, and there's a few essays that talk about this, that actually a lot of the Group of Seven's paintings were fairly conservative, right? And that's why when Tom Thomson starts getting a little bit wild in some of these paintings, and I know some people are like, wild? Are you kidding me? But at the time, this was starting to push boundaries that moving him a little bit further away from some of his friends that later formed the Group of Seven. And later on, Lauren Harris himself goes totally abstract. If you look at the late Lauren Harris paintings, totally abstract. So Tom was like, maybe 50 years ahead of Lauren Harris in terms of abstraction. Okay, so let's mix this color. Sorry. I'm gonna take some warm blue here, and then I'm gonna take some cool blue. Let's put these side by side. And then I'm going to take a smaller brush, and let's just get this in here. And I think we've got a bit of it coming through back here. And I'm going to paint a little bit into the tree just so that I can always widen it if I want. Actually, there's a branch there. Okay. Okay, that's good. Next, what I want to do is I'm going to mix a darker color. Just reach. Okay. So let's mix a cool color that could go in the background for those mountains. Let's take some of this cool red. Let's take some of our cool yellow, mix this together, and we're going to get a nice cold green, gross browny color. Let's mix some of the blue in here. Okay, just take a bit of the cold or warm blue. Just helps darken it down a bit. Okay. And then yeah, I'm gonna take this brush. And then I'm just going to paint this in really quickly. Okay. So we'll just zoom in. Okay. So you can see it's a bit transparent. That's all right. We'll just let it stay a bit transparent. We'll do another layer here in a moment. And then we can look around and think, okay, do we want any more of this color elsewhere? I don't think so. I think that's okay for that. That's a nice dark color that we'll keep on the palette for a little bit. So let's clean off these brushes. We're going to mix a warm version of our dark color in a second. And we'll be able to see the difference between a dark warm color and dark cool color side by side. Because we want this dark color to be in the cool color that we just painted to be in the background, and then we want to have a warm color in the foreground. So we're going to take this, yeah, I guess we can just do this right here. Take some warm red. And here we'll finally go into our warm yellow. And mix these together. And now we've got a nice warm brown. And this is basically the brown that I'm going to use right now for painting the tree. Right? So all that was our warm blue, warm red, warm yellow. And I'm going to just use a slightly smaller brush. And we're going to kind of go over some of the red lines that we did. Actually, you know what? I'm going to do... Okay, I'm going to stop for a second. What I'm going to do, I'm going to make a green right now, and I'm going to paint that green in to where the foliage is. So I'm not even going to bother cleaning my brush because I don't mind it getting a little bit of a brownish cast to it. So I think this might just make it a little bit clearer for people. I would be happy doing this on my own, but I'm always like, oh yeah, people are trying to paint at home, and you don't want to lose people, right? So here's some warm yellow and warm blue together, and we get this, you know, like a racing green, as it's sometimes called. Okay. And let's just go to a slightly smaller brush. Let's go to... Okay, so let's now, we're going to start getting a little bit more precise here. All right, so let's think about where these blobs go. I'm not going to be too concerned with getting it perfect. And I'm probably going to have to paint a color over top of this again afterwards. Okay, so this next, I'm painting this area right here. Right, that's this area right here am I painting. Now he does have all these really beautiful red lines crisscrossing through here. I'll try to get a little bit of that in. But it's pretty hard to do that, you know. So I'm not gonna labor over this painting that long to try to get it like super precise. If I want, I could paint over. Maybe I'll do a little bit of. I'll kind of fake it out, in fact, a little bit, just for our sake. I'll do that later on. So I know you're probably like, oh, this is getting a little confusing because we've got this cool color in the mountain behind. I totally understand. Remember, the painting he's working on is about 6 times the size of this. So, you know, each one of these lines on here is probably at least the thickness of your finger, right? So when you're thinking like, oh, it's like it wouldn't be very hard for him to see these differences, and he's the one that came up with the sketch, and you know, so it's always hard. I think it's actually probably in some ways harder to replicate these paintings than it is to do it the first time around originally. I mean, you could paint... In fact, let's just paint this... the tree green. That's going to help make it go... We got a nice brown over top of that. That will work really well, so... Okay, let's just carry on down. In fact, might as well just go right over to here. Okay, and then... Alright, I got a bit more blue on that bush, that's alright. Okay, so I think I've got the majority of the stuff I want for the tree in. In fact, I'm even debating... Yeah, you know what? I'm going to take this same color. I wasn't planning on doing this, but I like the results of this so far. Of just to kind of start doing a little bit of the outlining here with this darker color. Because if I paint this brown later, I think it's going to look awesome. And it won't hurt to kind of just bring some of these lines back out. Now I'm not going to do everything because we want some of this actually to be little dots, right? In fact, like let's say here, you know what's interesting? I'm just noticing this for the first time. It's pretty bold of him to have one tree here and another tree here, and for this tree branch to be coming down and kind of invading the other tree, I guess. Like that is a pretty... That takes a certain amount of confidence, because most people would try to keep them separate to avoid any kind of confusion. That's pretty bold, I gotta say. That takes a certain amount of kind of courage when you're painting to not worry about those kind of little things. Okay, I think that's good for right now. I'll do more of that stuff later on. Let's just look at the bottom and start putting in some darker colors. Down here, this is again, this is just green. This is my warm green, warm yellow, warm blue. Oops. Okay. Great. So let's zoom back out and just see where we're at. So right now, you know, like the sky has got a bit of like an Easter egg kind of quality. It looks a little bit kind of silly. I get it. I understand completely. Remember, that's... You know, this, if you were going to stop for the day, this would be a great place to stop. Maybe we'll do a little bit more here on these tree branches. But I think you've got a pretty good kind of start to this painting. Let's just continue. I want to finish off the foreground and that tree. So I'm just going to mix a little bit more of a lighter green. Again, this is just warm yellow and warm blue. And in fact, I'm just going to quickly throw this in here. Yeah, I'll just throw that in right like that. Right, just we'll refine all that later on. I see your question, Joshua. Is there a date for the celebration of viewers' paintings? It'll be next weekend. So next weekend we'll do it on Saturday. We'll talk about people's artwork, and then on Sunday we're going to make a painting of Nelson Mandela for International Nelson Mandela Day, if you want to join me for that. Okay. Oh yeah, so I mixed this brown like 10 minutes ago. I'm going to take that brown and let's zoom in to the tree, and we're just going to kind of get, some of these lines up top here. So, like I've been saying a few times, my goal is not to reproduce these paintings 100%. So I want you to feel like you have some freedom to play a little bit here. Oops. I keep moving that when I want to move that. So feel free to, paint these branches in whatever way makes sense. If you're finding like if putting detail into a painting gives you a lot of anxiety, then don't put so many lines in there. You can see I'm also painting over some of these dots. Like this is a tree that's got like just tons of branches, right? So I don't think you can go wrong by just adding lots of them. I'm just going to take a bunch out just because the size of my canvas is limited and my time is limited. Okay. I think that's pretty good. Let's just let me get this. Okay, and is there any brown down here that we want to get? You know, by layering the green over top of this red, we've already sort of got a bit of a brownish thing going on down here. Okay. Great. Okay, let's back it out and just see where we're at now. Cool. Back that out. So those little dots, I'm gonna actually that might be, honestly, that might be the final thing that I might do on this entire painting, is put the little dots on after I've finished the background. Okay. So that was my hot tea, and now I transition to my iced tea, or what used to be iced tea. I'm going to be so that's homemade tea. I'm going to be so caffeinated by the end of this episode. Okay. I mean, this is great. Again, this would be where I would stop if I was planning on stopping for the day. And it wouldn't surprise me if Tom Thomson himself got his painting to this point. Like, this would be like, especially if he had a large canvas and he was working for like 8 or 9 hours, this would be a great place for him to get to and just let everything dry for like a week, maybe. If I was painting in oil paints, that might be something I would do for this particular painting, right? Because, again, if we just zoom in really closely, like, just the look of this, just to me looks like a relatively kind of thick paint. There's lots of white in these paint strokes. You know, they zip around. He's like painting colors over top of other colors. So I figure that he's probably, you know, painted it to this point, let things dry, and then he's going to fine-tune things afterwards. Okay, so I think what I'm going to do now is let's mix another a purple, and we're going to start putting that into here. We're just going to start tightening everything up, right? Tightening everything down here up. Getting exactly where we want all these colors to be. And that's going to take us, I bet you, this will take us maybe, in fact, I'm going to start setting a timer for myself. Let's see. I'm going to set a timer here for 20 minutes to try to get the sky done. Okay? so that just so I'm not laboring over everything. And I do this with my students at Emily Carr, where I teach in the daytime during the school year, because I think it's really important to manage your time efficiently and not to get hung up on like fiddling and fussing. There's a time and a place maybe for that, but especially when we're learning, it's just like it can be really destructive. Okay, so this time I'm gonna make we'll just take the same kind of purple, although this time I'm probably gonna have a little bit more white in the color. So take some white right off the bat. Let's take some warm blue. I guess we got some of this still here. Cool red. And I need some more white. I pretty much need a bunch of a lot of colors here. Okay, let's just take more of this white. I'm actually going to take a bit of the cool blue and add it to this color, because that's going to dull down the purple a little bit. Because right now we've got kind of it's a nice purple, but it's very Easter eggy. It's a really, really bright purple, even with the white in there. So by adding a bit of the cool blue, cool blue is, if we just kind of quickly digress, right? What we mixed our cool red and warm blue together, so we get a nice bright purple, especially if we add white to it. But if we start adding some other colors, let's say the cool blue, which is further away from it, we start kind of going over getting closer to that neutral core. In fact, if you really wanted to dull that purple down, add a little bit of yellow, like just a fraction of it to it. If you add too much, it's going to go brown. But so let's just, since I just mentioned it, I'm just going to take, like, you see, like a very little bit of yellow, and mix this in here, and then boom, it starts to go a little bit more on the gray side of things. Right, so it won't have quite such a candy color. Which, if you want a candy color painting, then by all means, but okay. What's kind of cool about doing this kind of thing too is I can paint over some of the colors I already had, like some of these brighter purples, or even paint the purple over the green. And it's like I'm mixing new colors in place. It's kind of hard to see, like over camera. Let's kind of zoom in, and maybe let's go to the top right corner. Let's just start there. Okay. So how far down do we want to go? Just take a second to zoom out here. Where were we? Oops. Okay. So that purple kind of ends maybe right up here with this line. So let's have to be conscious of that. Okay, let's move over here. So on the right side, far fewer areas of purple. It's more greenish. Okay, so speaking of which, let's just take, let's mix a bit more green. So here's our cool yellow and cool blue. Let's get lots of white. And then let's just start painting. This in. And so we have our mountain here. We've got, actually, let's just zoom back up. As I said, actually, let's go over here and we'll just, this is green. Sorry, it might be easier just if I zoom out for a while I'm just putting these, sorting these little details out. Okay. So for me, I start thinking about this type of thing as like a chess match that I'm having with the painting. And now, like, for me, that's an exciting thing. I like to play. I haven't played chess in a while, but I used to play all the time when I was in art school with my instructors. I'd often have meetings with them, and we just play chess for a couple of hours. But it reminds me a lot of that kind of thing where it's like you're kind of making moves here. So it's green going across. Okay, and then I'm just going to add, going back and forth, adding maybe a little bit more yellow into these colors. It's important to have kind of a substantial amount of white in here. So what I really want is that the greens and the purples, they never look like it's all one color out of the tube. Every little, there's like little variations, I guess. And the only way to really get that is if each time you go into your palette, you're mixing, you allow other colors to get on your paintbrush. That's why I also try not to pre-mix too much. And so as I'm doing this, I realize, oh, you know what? That purple I put down there, it was way too bright. It needs to be more grayish, and it needs to be has to be a lighter gray going into that purple. It's just too bright. Okay, so I got 8 minutes left. So I'm just gonna pick up the pace a little bit with this fiddling, like this. This is the kind of stuff that I love doing. I could do this kind of stuff all day long. Okay, and then while I'm right here, let's just continue a bit down into the water. I was going to do this separately, but it doesn't hurt to do this now while I've got this color on my brush. Okay, so one thing I'm just thinking about, I'm playing around with a little bit of this horizon line. I just want to make sure I'm not... It's hard to read these numbers. So let's just go from the top. Yeah, pretty good. Okay, good. It just for a second there, it started looking like things were getting crooked and the painting was going to slide off to the right there. Oh, I love that, and I love this way the way it looks right now. But let's do. I'm going to go into this. Just any more down here. Yeah, let's do the purple in the sky. And so I'm just going to take more of this white. Remember we had this purple that we had here? I'm going to mix this into the white separately up here because it's just too dark. And that's going to be pretty bright, so it's a little bit later. There we go. And you could say, like, well, why didn't you just mix that to begin with? Or, like, we've done now, like, what, 3 or 4 layers of paint here. And the answer is that, yeah, that might have been helpful. I could have really sat down and worried, you know, a lot about trying to mix the exact right color. But the fact is color is always relative, right? I might have had the exact right color, but it would be different next to the colors that are here. So even though it was exactly right, it could look wrong just by virtue of the other colors around it being off, and would change that color. Okay, just going to do a little bit more of this pinkish color, peachy color. Again, lots of white in here. Okay, so that was 20 minutes I said for the sky. So lastly, before I just leave the sky here, I'm just going to take some white and yellow and cool yellow. Put some of this in here. I really want to be able to get that done before I move on, so that's why I'm a little bit of nitpicky here. So I'm picking up all of this paint that's not dry, so I'm just going to blow dry that and then finish up with that yellow. So remember I was saying that there might be some, that Tom painted some of the background in front of the foreground. I think this is sort of where it's going to happen. I think once because I'm in about 2 minutes, I'm going to move on to painting the foreground and kind of finishing off some of the tree, like the tree here. And I might want to brighten or darken some of the sky after I've done that. Oops. Okay, I gotta plug those things back. There's also, I think, a bit of warm yellow in the background here. So right now I got a lot of a very bright lime yellow. I think we might want to put a little bit of warmth into that sky as well, that it might be lacking. But again, I don't really know that for sure until I get a little bit more color into the foreground. Yeah, definitely seems like there's some bit of like a warm orange happening right in here. Okay, so that's good for right now. Although so one of the things things that I'm kind of being mindful of is, see how there's like almost like an artificial line here, right? I want to try to avoid those things. That just, it irks me. So I'm trying to like think of like, how can I paint these so that I can kind of just, I don't have these artificial lines in the sky. I find that distracting, so try to touch that, get that out of the way. Okay, so the water, what I'm going to do with the water, I'm going to take more of this warm blue, some warm blue and white. I paint with a little bit of that because as we get closer to the foreground, we want things to be warmer, right? And you know what's kind of interesting is this actually has more white in it than this, but because this is next to a darker color, it appears kind of lighter, and this appears darker because it's surrounded by lighter colors. Get a bit of purple going on. Just Okay. I think it's good enough for right now. Let's now... I'm going to now work on the tree and bring that to as close to a resolution as possible. So let's take our warm blue and warm yellow. There's not much left here, so we'll just go right into here. Previous color we mixed. And let's, if we zoom in on these, it does look like a lot of these brush strokes for the tree itself are vertical or diagonal, right? They're all kind of going up in this way, which counteracts this horizontal movement of the background. So I'm just going to try to replicate a little bit of that. Actually, I'm just going to move down to a smaller brush too. Oh, let's zoom in. Okay. So here's where you can kind of paint around some lines that you want to kind of imagine are branches and stuff. You don't have to do too much of it, because that's otherwise, again, you'll be sitting here for hours. But I think a little bit of it is kind of cool. This is just warm yellow and warm blue, right? Maybe a little bit more on the yellowy side. I should have actually done my... Well, you know what? I was going to say I should have done the background first, but that'll kind of... won't be so bad if I do that next. Really push this thing he's doing with foregrounds and background stuff. Okay. So now we're gonna go right into this foliage on the ground. Did you even see what I was doing? Oops. I didn't even notice that this was, I thought that was part of the background, so let's fix that now. So I might say to myself, oh, some of this looks a little bit too light, these greens. Well, let's just hold off, because we're going to put in this darker blue in the background shortly. And that will, you know, if this is too dark right now, then I'm going to have to lighten it up later. So. Okay. So I've got all the trees. Let's just now quickly go over the ground down here.